Hey everybody, what's going on? Hellmite here, bringing another video from Grab the Lantern today. Udyr's rework has finally been revealed in full, and I am really excited to talk you guys through the changes that Riot have made to Udyr's kit. Now, importantly to note, I do feel like these changes are going to make a lot of Udyr players very upset. So if you are an Udyr main, I do think there's a lot of good things that happened, but I also think that there are some changes that Riot made to fundamentally who Udyr is at his core that people may not like, but let's not beat around the bush any longer. Let's go ahead and talk through Udyr's new kit. Udyr's new passive is called Bridge Between. Udyr has stances. That's essentially what his passive is here, and he can also reactivate his active stance to awaken it for bonus effects with a shared cooldown on his Awaken between all stances. Each time Udyr enters or awakens a stance, he gains bonus attack speed on his next two auto attacks and refunds some of Awaken's cooldown per attack he makes. Now, importantly to note here is the next two attacks. That is a theme that's going to carry throughout Udyr's kit. Also importantly to note here, there is no passive stacking benefit to his movement speed that he used to get. Instead, the benefit for swapping stances constantly is by keeping your attack speed steroid up, and also by allowing you to refund Awaken's cooldown, letting you use it more often in the middle of fights. This is the important thing to note, and generally, there's nothing too controversial about this. Udyr's Q is Wilding Claw. He gains a burst of attack speed, and his next two attacks deal bonus physical damage on hit. If you awaken this ability, he gains even more attack speed, and his next two attacks chain lightning off the target, bouncing up to 6 times. The lightning can strike the same target multiple times, and because it does percent max health damage, it really allows Udyr to lay on the DPS on individual targets. This is your DPS ability. Nothing much has changed here. Also, you can tell now this is not a stance, so to speak, and there is no passive benefit for remaining in this stance. You get the window of attack speed, you get the first two attacks with the bonus damage, and that is it. And this is a theme that unfortunately carries through Udyr's kit, so you guys can look forward to none of his stances, except one, having a passive benefit for him remaining in them. Suffice it to say, though, this ability does have a very tremendous amount of DPS potential, especially if he awakens the ability. There is a lot of damage that he's going to be able to do with this if he can catch an enemy champion out isolated and get to clawing them with an awakened Q. Udyr's W is Iron Mantle. He gains a shield, and his next two attacks restore health. Now, important to note, this is there is lifesteal, but it's also a flat heal built into this as well. Additionally, this is more or less the same as Turtle Stance on Live. There is no benefit from staying in this. You get the couple of hits that heal you, and that is going to be it, but at least you do get the shield on activation as well, so there is a reason to swap to this. If you awaken this ability, you get a bigger shield, the two attacks heal even more, and Udyr restores a percentage of his maximum health over the next few seconds. This is a very powerful windowed defense that allows you to really sponge off some damage. Fundamentally, I do feel like this is a lot weaker than it used to be. I think while it does allow Udyr to heal a bunch, fundamentally he has to remain in combat, and I just don't think the defenses are going to be that much unless he's itemizing full tank, but I do quite like this as an ability by giving Udyr some degree of windowed durability in the middle of a fight, as well as being able to swap to this just for a couple of auto attacks as opposed to having to stay in it for a long period of time, constantly healing. Udyr's E is Blazing Stampede. This is fundamentally the same as Bear Stance was. He gets a bonus movement speed, his first attack against each target, lunges a short distance, and stuns them. Importantly to note, this is the only stance that Udyr has that has a passive benefit. As long as he is in his E, his auto attacks will stun, though of course this is compensated for by the fact that there is a per target cooldown. If you awaken this ability, you gain even more movement speed and briefly become immune to CC. This is a big deal for a kiteable champion like Udyr. Before, he was dependent on the movement speed stacking from Monkey's agility to help get him all the way into a fight. Now he can just straight up say, I don't care about your dark bindings or your crescendos or your enchanted crystal arrows. I'm going to run straight through that and get these stun off. This also means that there's a bit of a decision to make about your awakened stances. Remember, they all share a cooldown. Do you rely on your E normal to get you all the way there so you can awaken Q your opponent to death, or do you awaken your E to guarantee you get in but sacrifice some DPS? There are decisions to be made in the new Udyr kit, and I do quite like that. Udyr's R finally is Wingborne Storm. Udyr temporarily summons a storm around him that slows and damages nearby units, as his next two attacks cause the storm to pulse, dealing bonus magic damage to enemies in the AoE or immediately around him if the storm is already gone. If Udyr awakens the storm, he unleashes it, causing it to deal additional damage and chase after the last enemy he auto-attacked. What this means is that you don't even technically have to be in, well, I guess you do have to be in the stance in order for you to awaken it, but it does mean if you whack a guy, you can enter the Wingborne Storm stance and then reactivate it for the Awaken to just get the storm to follow after the person. This is, I think, a big deal as well. They've shifted this ability away from sort of a secondary DPS stance, which competed then very heavily with Tiger stance, in favor of a utility-based stance that also gives Udyr stickiness. Again, a very important thing for a kiteable champion like Udyr to have. This, I think, has a lot of interactions with Blazing Stampede. If Udyr is able to use a regular Blazing Stampede to close the gap, he can then use an Awakened Wingborne Storm to stick to that target and keep dealing damage to them afterwards then with Wild and Claw. Conversely, if Udyr has to awaken Blazing Stampede just to get there, he at least has the normal Wingborne Storm to keep the target next to him in order to get damage off. But this means that overall Udyr has a lot of decisions to be made about which stance he's awakening when, and in what order he swaps stances. Maybe he swaps to Wingborne Storm, but takes a lot more damage than he expected, and if he's already swapped to Q, he's not going to be able to press Iron Mantle in time to survive. Conversely, if you use your Q early on, you may get a bunch of damage, but you might not be able to stick to the target, and if you awaken it and your target flashed away, well, you'll still have Blazing Stampede to chase them down, but that may not be enough. I generally am a fan of this kit, and honestly, if you showed me this kit and said this is a new champion that is coming out that we've never seen before, and his name is Udyr, and he has this unique stance-based playstyle, I would say, great, this kit looks awesome. I really like the decision-making behind it, I really like the just uniqueness that it has in not having an ultimate, and I like how his passive then interacts with the rest of his stances. However, he does miss some of that Udyr feel. Udyr is about these stances. He enters a stance, he is in that stance until he swaps, and there are constant benefits to being in that stance. There are still reasons to swap, the reasons being the stacking movement speed on Monkey's agility, as well as being able to re-trigger the activate effects of the abilities, getting the bonus movement speed from Bear stance, or refreshing your Tiger Strike in Tiger stance. There are a lot of things that I really like about the old Udyr kit that are no longer in this one. Stances are gone, there is no passive benefit for remaining in them. And what this means is that even though you may really like the idea that you get the bonus attack speed and the bunch of damage from Wild and Claw, you have to swap off of it because it doesn't provide you with constant benefits. This is, I think, cutting away at a little bit of what the core of Udyr is. He fundamentally feels like a little bit of a different champion now. He's not quite as stance-focused. But admittedly, I think there's a lot more decision-making for Udyr to make with this new kit, and potentially more room for skilled Udyr players to really show their stuff. Because less of the benefits are passive, and we're shifted instead to the awakened effects, I really do feel like Udyr now has to get value off of his awakenings, as opposed to before, where he just kind of felt like a stat stick. You could just say, I am in Tiger stance, I out DPS you, period. Now there's a decision to be made. I could enter Tiger stance and then awaken the Tiger stance, or Wild and Claw, I guess, but if my target then leaves, gap closes away from me, I suddenly am down my Awaken and not getting any of that DPS, as opposed to before where it's sort of, yeah, I'll just swap to Bear stance and then run you down and then swap back to Tiger stance. No harm, no foul, right? Versus on this new kit where you are giving up something when you awaken an ability. I do like the idea that the Awaken abilities can be refunded as well if you do use the Searing Charge to get all the way into a fight with your Awakened form, and then you're able to stick in that fight for long enough. Remember, each of the 2 auto attacks he makes following a stance activation help refund cooldown on his Awaken. You could theoretically get another Awakened ability in the middle of a team fight, especially if you're really able to hit enemies hard. I'm wondering how this interacts with Ginsu's Rage Blade, for example, allowing you to stack on hits twice. Not that Ginsu's would necessarily be a good idea on Udyr, but I do think it's potentially an interesting itemization choice. But either way, I like this kit. I really, really do. I'm worried about what the Udyr mains are going to think about it, especially with regards to no longer having these stances. But you guys will have to let me know what you think of this down in the comment section below. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts, especially if you were an existing Udyr player. I'd love to hear what you guys think of losing these stance benefits in favor of these new, potentially stronger awakened effects. If you guys think that's a cool thing, that'd be great. If you guys aren't a big fan of that, also let me know all that down in the comments. If you enjoyed the video today, go ahead and leave a like. And if you really enjoyed the video, consider subscribing. I upload a video every Monday, Friday, and on patch days as well. Once again, thank you guys so very much for watching. I do appreciate it, and I'll talk to you all later.